men to battle the al-Qaeda affiliate al-Shabaab. Last week, the terror group claimed responsibility for killing 15 people in a minibus. Now, this marks the first time in 23 years that American forces have been sent, ground troops sent to Somalia.
President Trump privately signing a law that critics say puts women's health at risk. The action reverses Obama-era regulations by allowing states to withhold federal money from facilities that provide abortions. Planned Parenthood makes it clear that federal law prohibits taxpayer dollars from funding abortions. They say a bulk of its federal cash goes towards women's preventative health services.
All right, Donald Trump, he vowed to be the America First president, but now he's dropping bombs in Syria and Afghanistan, sending troops to Somalia, threatening North Korea. What is the military strategy? Is there a strategy?
I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me. I would bomb the out of them.
Well, that was then candidate Donald Trump outlining his ISIS strategy. Yesterday's use of the Moab bomb in Afghanistan appears to be Exhibit A of that policy. Joining us now for more context is CNN Global Affairs analyst Kimberly Doscher. She is senior national security correspondent at the Daily Beast, and CNN military analyst retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, who was the Army Commanding General, Europe and 7th Army. Great to have both of you here with all of your experience. General, let me start with you. I mean, the Moab is certainly bombing the blank out of ISIS. How do you see what's happened?
I don't see it that way at all, Allison. I hate to do this, but I want to take the breathless commentary out of this. This is a tactical weapon. Mick Nicholson, as he reported and as we talked about yesterday, is using that because the Joint Munitions Guide told him that's the right weapon for that particular area. But because it is a big explosion, because it does fit the narrative that Mr. Trump said that he would bomb the S out of everybody, everyone's getting excited about it. It's not a strategy, it's a tactic, and the generals on the ground can handle that.
That's really good context, and we certainly don't want any breathlessness, but we do want context, Kimberly. And here's a couple of here are the things that have happened in just President Trump's first 85 days. So look at the military actions, okay, already under President Trump. Some of these have been lauded as successes, such as the strike on the Syrian airbase. Some of them have been abject failures, such as the raid in Yemen that went terribly wrong. How do you put all this in context?
Well, I have to second Mark in that I've spoken to officials in Afghanistan, and they have said that General Nicholson requested this munition during the Obama administration because he was looking ahead to the Afghan fighting season. He's already seen that the Taliban has been beating the Afghan army back and taking back some territory, and he saw ISIS growing, 600 to 800 fighters, most of them in the district that was hit. So he had looked ahead and said, I could use this weapon. Now, is he more comfortable using it in this administration than he may have been in the last, considering that the Obama administration had a reputation for micromanaging from the NSC down, something that their NSC officials have really pushed back against, but that was their reputation. I think that he would have had a higher comfort level under the Trump administration because Trump has indicated that he is comfortable delegating a lot of authority down to the military commanders.
Okay, that's very interesting context and news that you've just given us, Kim. If this was requested during the Obama administration, that does change the feeling of it, General. And what do you think about President Trump saying, I don't need to know about everything that they're doing, even the use of the Moab, because I'm giving them blanket authority?
No, that's not a good thing to say. First of all, he does need to know. If he's putting, as the commander-in-chief, military members into harm's way, he needs to know what's going on, and he needs to receive the briefings on what's happening around the world. And I'd push back a little bit on the comment that he's loosening the strings, because you talk to the senior commanders, most will tell you, hey, there was nothing that prevented us from doing our job in the Obama administration. There may have been some NSC staffers who were asking a lot of questions and could be, let's just say, painful at times with what was called the 6,000-mile screwdriver to correct kinds of operations that were going on. But truthfully, the commanders in the field, and I've talked to all of them, didn't feel they were being inhibited from doing what they needed to be.
Is that right,
what they needed
General?
to do.
I'm really interested in that because that was some of the narrative that we certainly heard.
By who, Allison?
By Republicans. We heard from Republicans.
Okay. So the people not on the battlefield,
the generals felt hamstrung.
You know, X, Y, or Z. You will talk to most of the general officers, the people who are conducting strategy, and they will say they have been able to do the things that they needed to do.
Go ahead, Kim.
I have to jump in and say, yes, that's what I've heard as well, that they finally got to where they wanted to go in the Syria-Iraq strikes against ISIS, but that they knew that this scrutiny, this 6,000-mile screwdriver, as you termed it, was on them, and that did sometimes make them hesitate or slow things down. I did talk to multiple Pentagon planners, at least, who said it just drove them crazy, that they did feel like they were being second-guessed, and that had a psychological effect in terms of they knew they couldn't push things that far, and it took a while to get approval of some operations they thought should have had approval faster.
Okay.
And in this administration, it's the opposite.
Okay, General, you've got 10 seconds.
Let me just throw one more thing in there if I can, Alex, because this is the way it's done. I mean, in our system of government, and even going back to a guy named Karl Clausewitz, combat warfare is politics by other means. You can't divorce combat from what's going on in the political arena. Some play more actively than others, but you can't divorce the two from each other.
Okay, thank you both very much for all of the reporting and context. Great to see you. John.
Or the doctor who was dragged off his United Airlines flight announcing he plans to sue. That case, it could be more millions, but will it ever reach the courts? We're going to discuss next.
What makes this simple salad the best simple salad ever? Heart-healthy California walnuts. The best simple veggie dish ever? Heart-healthy California walnuts. The best simple dinner ever? Heart-healthy California walnuts. Great tasting, heart-healthy California walnuts. So simple. Get the recipes at walnuts.org.
We're on to you, diabetes. Time's up, insufficient prenatal care. And administrative paperwork, your days of drowning people are numbered. Same goes for you, budget overruns. And rising costs. Wipe that smile off your face. We're coming for you too. For those who won't rest until the world is healthier, neither will we. Optum, how well gets done.
Introducing Listerine Zero Alcohol. It delivers a whole mouth clean with a less intense taste. So it has the bad breath germ-killing power of this, with the lighter feel of this. For a whole mouth clean with a less intense taste. Try Listerine Zero Alcohol. Also try Listerine Pocket Packs for fresh breath on the go.
How do we make a portfolio stronger? By weaving together only those factors proven to drive performance over time. Because if it's not resilient enough for changing markets, it's not good enough for our investors. Visit jhinvestments.com or ask your advisor for prospectus with investment objectives, risks, charges, expenses, and other information to read and consider carefully before investing.
We are Sikhs. Sikh Americans.
We believe in equality, tolerance, and respect for all.
Because Sikh values are American values.
We are doctors,
PTA moms,
patriots.
We are Americans. We like Game of Thrones.
I'm obsessed with Star Wars. I've seen every episode of SpongeBob because that's what my daughters like to watch.
We
are Sikhs.
If you drive a personal car for work and don't track your business miles, you could be losing thousands of dollars, unless you have MileIQ. It's the app that automatically detects and logs all of your business miles so you get a great deduction or reimbursement. MileIQ provides comprehensive reporting that shows you how much you save with each drive. The average MileIQ subscriber deducts $547 a month. That's more than $6,500 a year. So take control. Download it for free and join the millions of drivers who trust MileIQ.
Are allergies holding you back? Break through your allergies. Try new Flonase Sensimist instead of allergy pills. It's more complete allergy relief and a gentle mist you may not even notice. using unique Mist Pro technology. New Flonase Sensimist delivers a gentle mist to help block 6 key inflammatory substances that cause your symptoms. Most allergy pills only block 1, and 6 is greater than 1. Break through your allergies. New Flonase Sensimist.
What do you get after 6 continents?
That's awesome.
And 4 Emmy Awards?
There we go. Life is good.
You get sent to the South Pole.
My face hurts.
New season of Parts Unknown starts Sunday, April 30th at 9 on CNN.
An Arizona high school football player is making history, becoming the first woman to earn a scholarship at an NCAA school at the Division II level or higher. Coy Wire was more in this morning's Bleacher Report. Hey, Coy.
Good morning, John. I'm here at the Atlanta Braves' brand new state-of-the-art stadium. More on that in a second. We have to talk about this amazing accomplishment of Becca Longo, the high school kicker out of Arizona, just crushing glass ceilings. Becca only started playing football a couple years ago, and when she signed her letter of intent to play for Adams State University in Colorado, she couldn't believe it. She could not believe it when she learned that she has done something that no other woman has done before. We caught up with her yesterday.
And that I could actually do it. I mean, I'm going to go in, I'm going to be ready to compete. I'm not one to back it down to anybody.
All right, guys, there seems to be a bit of an arms race here in pro sports stadiums. In the past year, we've had 2 NFL stadiums pop up with the Vikings and the Falcons. And with the next few years, there'll be 3 more teams with new stadiums. The Rams and Chargers in LA and the Raiders in Vegas. And I am here at Major League Baseball's newest stadium, the Atlanta Braves SunTrust Park, where they went all out to create a great fan experience. You have to figure out a way to get people away from their couches and away from that 60-inch flat screen and get them to the ballparks. As you can see, they are zip lining, rock climbing, any kind of food or drink you could possibly imagine. As far as technology, fastest Wi-Fi of any stadium in the U.S. and an app that can find the nearest burger spot, frosty beverage, even reserve you a spot in the zip line. And for the Braves and Padres tonight, the opener here, it's at 7:35 Eastern. The first game in the brand new stadium is going to be rocking, John.
Now, I'll take it, Coy. That was awesome. And in your next hit, I want to know what was in that burger and how big that massive thing was. Mother of all burgers. Thank you very much, Coy. All right, this will not come as a surprise. There's an epic legal fight brewing between United Airlines and this passenger who was dragged off of the flight. How can United possibly defend itself? We debate that next.
Come on.
Bleacher Report.
What happened to my dad should have never happened to any human being, regardless of the circumstance. We were horrified and shocked and sickened to learn what had happened to him and to see what had happened to him.
The family of Dr. David Dow, the man who was forcibly removed from a United Airlines flight, voicing disgust at his treatment, announcing his plans to sue the airline and the city of Chicago. Now United is promising policy changes by the end of the month. Joining me to discuss, CNN chief business correspondent, star of Early Start, Christine Romans, and CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney, Joey Jackson. Joey, this is a fascinating news conference by the attorneys of this man. They talked about his injuries, broken nose, concussion, lost 2 front teeth, injured sinuses, reconstructive surgery. Right. You predicted already $5 million in this case. Does that raise the stakes?
Wow. It certainly could, and it goes to those issues of punitive damages that we talked about, which are designed to punish, right? You have compensatory damages to compensate you for your losses that you sustained as a result of this. But this taps into the critical issue of was this action reasonable, John? Was this action necessary? Was it appropriate, or was it something else? And so therefore, I think in the press conference, when we learn about the significance of the injuries, it makes people even more furious at the airlines and furious at what they did to this person who just wanted to get home.
And that was part 2 of what was so fascinating to me yesterday, where the lawyers for this man didn't just talk about what happened to him, the injuries, but talked about the culture at the airlines. Listen to this.
Yeah, I would say there is a culture of disrespect, of rudeness. But what's unfortunately occurred here in Dr. Dow's case is rudeness, bullying customers has gone the next step now to physical injury.
I'm going to talk about the business culture with Christine in just a second, but from a legal standpoint, why do you talk about the culture of the airlines in general? Why do you tap into customer anger?
Because what you're doing is you're tapping into that reservoir of discontent. And when you do that, you raise the settlement value. This is not going to see the courtroom. The reality is that there's a business interest, right, in United to get this off the news, to get us from stop talking about it. And so if you really want to tap into it and really want them to turn the page, you elevate the value, you elevate the outrage, and you talk about how the culture created the conditions for this to occur.
So, Christine Romas, United just announced all kinds of changes effective April 30th, right? They're not going to remove passengers unless for safety or security reasons. Probably a good idea. At this point, they're going to review how to handle overbooked flights in other measures. How much trouble is United Airlines in right now?
Well, the PR damage is really significant. You know, there was a market hit that has since recovered from, but the PR damage is very significant here. But how much trouble is it in? What other choices do many customers have? There have been so many mergers in this sector that there are 4 major carriers in the United States that control, 80% of the flights, 80% of the routes. So in most cases, I think customers are going to choose the airline that gets them where they have to go on time at the price that they want. One thing that really angers people, you talk about that reservoir of just anger and distrust of the airlines. The consumer satisfaction ratings of the airlines have been terrible as an industry for a long time, even as they're making record profits. And so people see smaller planes with tighter seats, with all kinds of fees, and they feel as though the experience just is not commensurate with what flying should be.
It's clear, though, United knows it's in a moment where it's very, very sensitive right now in serious jeopardy. Delta, I had a vacation canceled last week, and I was supposed to fly to New Orleans. Delta canceled it as part of the mess they were in last week. Overnight, I got 2 emails from them. One, that every ticket holder I was flying with gets a $200 voucher, and 20,000 miles. The airlines know
they do.
There's an issue right now.
They do, and you see the big international airlines are almost dancing on United's grave this week, right? With some of these trolling them with these tweets and stuff about how they're really the friendly skies. But they're trying for the international traveler, the big business international traveler who pays a lot of money. The big international airlines want to get some of that business from United on the back of this.
All right, you're at their mercy, and that's the issue, and that gets more settlement value because people are upset, John. They're upset.
The employees of these companies, though, they're upset too because they feel as though the experience for them has gone down as well. Drunk passengers, people arriving late with too many bags, so it goes both ways.
All right, guys, thanks so much, Christine Romas. Safe travels.
Thank you.
This weekend. Thanks to our international viewers for watching. For you, CNN Newsroom is next. For our U.S. viewers, New Day continues right now.
This was the right weapon against the right target.
For the first time ever, the mother of all bombs was used by the U.S. military in combat.
We are so proud of our military, and it was another successful event.
We can't just bomb our way to national security.
What is the political strategy? What is the political objective?
North Korea is indeed ready to pull off its 6th nuclear test.
Bottom line is North Korea's got to change its behavior.
The North Koreans say if they are provoked, they are not afraid to go to war.
Ramping up of tensions of this nature, it's like a tinderbox. All it takes is a spark to start a fire.
This is New Day with Chris Cuomo and Allison Camerata.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your New Day. Chris has the day off. John Berman joins us this morning. Great to have you.
Great to be here.
We do have breaking news right now. The U.S. commanding general in Afghanistan calling the massive bomb that the U.S. dropped there the right weapon against the right target. This was the most powerful non-nuclear bomb ever used in combat. According to Afghan officials, the bomb destroyed caves and tunnels used by ISIS fighters, and it killed dozens of those fighters.
Now, a lot of people are asking the question if this bomb was designed to send a message to North Korea. That as officials there accuse the United States of creating a dangerous situation that could lead to further escalation. Is North Korea on the verge of conducting a new nuclear test? We've got a lot to cover. It is day 85 of the Trump presidency. Let's begin with CNN Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr, who broke the story of that huge bomb strike. We got new information just minutes ago about that strike, Barbara.
Good morning, John. General Nicholson holding a press conference in Kabul just wrapped up. He did say now today at first light, U.S. forces and Afghan forces are on the ground at the site trying to assess the damage that the bomb caused. So far, he says, they see no evidence of civilian casualties. General Nicholson, a very experienced hand at these matters, knows full well the environment in Washington and that very question, was this bomb dropped due to some kind of other messaging that the Trump administration wanted to send, possibly to North Korea. He didn't address that, but what he did say, this was a target that they'd been looking at for some time, and he explained that they were totally focused on that and nothing else.
And the timing of the use of this weapon was simply the appropriate tactical moment against the proper target to use this particular munition. So it is not related to any outside events other than our focus on destroying Daesh in 2017.
And there's still up to 600 to 800 ISIS fighters, Daesh fighters in Afghanistan that U.S. forces, U.S. Special Operations Forces are going against. Now, back in Washington, as this unfolded yesterday, President Trump was asked, did he know about the mission? Did he authorize this extraordinary event? Listen to what he had to say.
Did you authorize it, sir?
Everybody knows exactly what happened, so... And what I do is I authorize my military. We have the greatest military in the world, and they've done a job as usual. So we have given them total authorization, and that's what they're doing. And frankly, that's why they've been so successful lately.
Total authorization. Very critical to try and understand what the president may be saying here. That doesn't mean he didn't know about it. He has, in fact, authorized commanders to have more ability to undertake missions on their own authority. And this was in Afghanistan in the works for some time. But it doesn't mean he doesn't know about it. U.S. commanders will tell you they don't want to surprise any president, any White House. They like the president to know what they're up to. Allison?
Good to know, Barbara. Thank you for all of that reporting. There's widespread concern at this hour that North Korea will conduct its 6th nuclear test this weekend. China warns the conflict could break out at any moment as the rhetoric from the North and the U.S. heats up. CNN's Alexandra Field is live in Seoul, South Korea, with all of the details. Alexandra.
Hey there, Allison. Good morning. Washington does fully expect and anticipate, and they're preparing for the possibility of a 6th nuclear test or another ballistic missile launch from North Korea, although no one can say with any certainty when exactly that would happen. The question now is how the U.S. will respond to those kinds of provocations. It is the issue that VP Mike Pence will take up when he makes his visit to the region, stopping in Seoul over the weekend and then moving on to Tokyo to talk about all of the options that are on the table in Washington when it comes to dealing with the nuclear threat from North Korea. And that, of course, includes, as we know well, a military option. It's the option that is feared in South Korea, which depends on the U.S. for its defense and its protection. But they also fear retaliation from North Korea. North Korea has already expressed its outrage at the presence of U.S. warships in the water off of the Korean peninsula, saying that the presence of nuclear strategic assets has threatened global security and could push the region to the brink of a thermonuclear war. That's the propaganda from Pyongyang. They've also released images this week of their leader, Kim Jong-un, conducting training exercises, a show of force that accompanies what will be the celebration of the most important day on their calendar. That's a holiday that comes tomorrow. It is around that holiday in the past where we have seen provocative moves like missile launches and other tests that could provoke a strong reaction. Allison, John?
Okay, Alexandra, thank you for being there and for all of that reporting. We have a lot to discuss. Let's bring in our panel. We have CNN political analysts David Gregory and Abby Phillip, along with CNN military analyst, retired U.S. Army Major General James Spider Marks. Spider, I want to start with you. We just heard something very interesting from one of our analysts, Kimberly Dozier, who said that the use of this Moab bomb, as we've said, the largest non-nuclear bomb ever employed by the U.S., was actually requested during the Obama administration. So why now, and why?
Well, first of all, let's back up just a tiny bit. The Moab was developed and tested back in early 2003, so it was available when I was the senior intel guy when we were going to war in Iraq. It was available for use. There was no good opportunity to use it because the military, Saddam's military, kind of frittered away and the insurgency popped up. So there was no good concentration of targets that were not separated from what would have been huge civilian casualties. So it was never used. This was a target that General Nicholson knew could be serviced by this munition, and it clearly was a tactical decision to do that, saving the lives of Afghan fighters and U.S. fighters that would have had to have cleared this target. So the rules of engagement and the collateral damage estimates, the decision processes have been in place and predate this administration, certainly go back to the Obama administration, Bush, et cetera. So they've been in place for a while.
David Gregory, the question is, does this large bomb have a larger strategic significance? Does it fit into a bigger Trump White House military global strategy? Is there a bigger Trump White House global military strategy?
Well, I think there's an emerging strategy of sending a political message with the use of force. I think you saw that in Syria. Look, the contrast couldn't be clearer to the previous administration. In Syria, for example, draw a red line, then don't back it up. We've heard from former advisors to President Obama who said that they wish he would have done that, would have done what President Trump has now done. I don't think it's a substitute for a larger military strategy in either of these countries. I think what could happen in Korea is still very much unknown. But there's no question that I think President Trump wants to send a message that there is a new president with an interest in sending a different kind of military and political message to adversaries around the world. And I think there's no question that the use of weaponry like this serves that larger point. But again, to the general's point, this is a tactical decision. I don't know that there's a larger strategy in place on how to deal with these issues.
Abby, let's look at the military actions that the military, the U.S. military has taken since President Trump came into office, because there's a lot of them. So, as you know, there was what was generally lauded and considered a success, the strike on the Syrian air base. There was this Moab bombing. As you know, in North Korea, the USS Carl Vinson is heading there now. In Iraq, they're adding 200 troops. Now, there are some that have gone terribly wrong. The raid in Yemen, where civilians were killed as well as a Marine. And then there's just been this friendly fire accident in another part of Syria. So, you know, some people say that this is not what President Trump campaigned on. This is not America first. But isn't this sort of in keeping with, we're going to keep America safe?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, one thing we should always remember is that the U.S. military is always engaged in a lot of pockets around the world. We just don't always hear about it. We're not always focused on it. One of the risks for Trump is that, as someone who ran against sort of disengaging the U.S. a little bit more from the world, using those resources instead to build up the domestic, you know, roads and bridges and so on and so forth, there's a risk of being perceived as someone who's just a little too hawkish for some of his core supporters. So far, Trump has really erred on the side of using a lot of sort of missile power. He hasn't really sort of put forward his position or his doctrine on what would it take for him to authorize ground troops in a part of the world. And until we really see where he lands on that, I think it's too early to know how far he's willing to go and how much he's really changed from his core tenets during the campaign.
That's an important distinction. Guys, stand by for a second, because I'm hearing we're just getting in now video of this bomb blast in Afghanistan, the Moab, the largest non-nuclear device ever deployed by the U.S. military. Let's watch this, then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, there is no sound on this, but you can see there, I guess, the
very large impact of that. I think that's the aftermath right there. We're going to re-rack it and show it one more time. Spider, you in particular, if you can watch this and tell us what we're seeing as we're seeing it here, Spider.
Yeah, first of all, notice the terrain. It's very restrictive. So when you have a concussive blast like that, it's going to be contained within an increasingly smaller area. So the force and the blast is just exacerbated based on where it's striking. Also bear in mind, this was a tunnel complex. So again, as that shock wave goes underground and gets into those different tunnels, it's constricted, and you can only imagine anybody who's down there is now turned to dust.
It's not a bunker buster, right? That's a different type of device. No. This is fuel ignition. It makes a very big fire, and that fire, in theory, goes underground and clears out the tunnels, correct?
It's an air burst above ground. You can determine at which altitude you want that thing to go off. That's based on how you describe the target. You then have a conically shaped kind of a radius of effects on the ground. It is not a bunker buster.
David Gregory, go ahead. What are you What do you want to weigh in on what the president's decision and the military's have been?
Well, again, I guess, I'm thinking about larger messaging, larger strategy at work. I just think we're at a place, and Spider Marks and I have talked about this in 2017 for the U.S. military and for this administration, where as you think about military strategy, air power alone has limited effect and limited utility. Even something as degraded significantly and maybe much closer to falling, at least in portions of Iraq, if not in Syria as much. You've got an audience in Pyongyang and in North Korea and in Syria and indeed in Russia. So there's a lot of politics involved here internationally where the president is trying to stake out ground. But again, I would say as a military strategy, these are still limited tools in terms of how you follow up on this strategically down the line.
I want to bring in our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr. Barbara, we are getting our first look at this video, the first actual military deployment, the first time the U.S. military has ever used this device. This was in a remote mountainous area. You see no signs of any communities or anything nearby. What do you see here?
Well, as we continue to play that video, what I can tell you is this fell, it's hard to see on the video there, but we know that this fell into a deep mountain valley. This there's mountain ridges surrounding the area, and this complex of caves and tunnels was deep in a valley surrounded by these steep mountains. So it's one of the ways that they could keep an eye on the target in the days leading up to this and try to ensure that there were no civilians in the area. That shot you see right there is a better look at this region, which is so mountainous and so remote. So it falls into this deep mountain valley, and the mountains surrounding it certainly, I think you can say, would have absorbed some of the blast, which also would have kept damage contained from any other civilian areas nearby. There are, at a distance, some villages, some areas where there are people, but troops on the ground this morning say they see no signs of civilian casualties. So General Nicholson at his press conference was making the point that this was the best weapon for the target in this remote area, because what they had seen were these ISIS fighters retreat into this mountain valley, into these caves and tunnels. Very difficult for troops on the ground, U.S. troops and Afghan troops on the ground, to really prosecute this kind of target. The ISIS fighters had laid out belts of IEDs and other obstacles, other weapons. They were fairly well dug in. And this is a classic tactic in this area of eastern Afghanistan, dating back to 2001 when the U.S. tried to flush out Osama bin Laden at Tora Bora, and that didn't work out for a lot of other reasons. But this is an area over the years where terrorists have fled into, hidden out in caves and tunnels, and they really do have the advantage because they can see U.S. troops coming at them on the ground. They can. Initial assessment is, they got what they were trying to go after, but probably important to remember that the U.S. estimate is there's still up to 800 ISIS fighters in Afghanistan.
Important to know. Barbara Starr, thanks so much. Guys, stand by, because, this huge bomb blast in Afghanistan is the second military strike launched without congressional approval in the last 2 weeks. Will the president go to Congress to get authorization? We're going to have a Republican congressman, an Afghan war veteran, joining us next.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, staying on top of the breaking news this morning, the Pentagon just released video of the huge bomb hitting and killing dozens of ISIS fighters, officials say, in tunnels and caves in remote eastern Afghanistan. Now, remember, this is the largest non-nuclear bomb the United States has ever used in combat. Joining me now is Congressman Brian Mast of Florida. He's an Army combat veteran. He served in Afghanistan. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. We're just getting our first look of that video, the Moab, the massive bomb that was used yesterday. Your reaction to this strike, sir?
I'm glad to see that there's a commitment to this level of violence of action from the commander-in-chief. I hope that we do see eventually an authorized use of military force that's going to be updated for our role that we're going to play in Afghanistan, for what we're going to be doing in Syria and other parts of the world. But I'm happy to see this level of commitment because it shows that we have somebody that's willing to fight to win.
You say eventually you need congressional authorization. The clock is ticking if you want to do this right, especially from Syria. It would be 60 days from the Syrian missile strike, which was about 10 days ago right now. Are you committed to pushing your fellow members of Congress to get involved here? Because before you were in Congress back in 2013, your comrades shirked their responsibilities or they decided not to vote.
And this is a conversation that we've been having already is, what is our approach to making sure that this is something that we get done? What is going to be the goal that we have? What are we trying to accomplish there? How do we get in there and do it? How do we get out of there after this mission is accomplished? And what are going to be some of the options for accomplishing that mission? It's important for everybody to know.
Has the White House, has the administration given you any indication that they have the answers to any of those questions?
I haven't had the opportunity to ask the White House those questions personally. When I get the opportunity to ask those questions personally, I certainly will. And I suspect you're going to see some movement on this, certainly as we return from recess back to Washington.
But as you watch this, and again, as I watch it, have they made clear what their larger strategy is?
Well, I think one of the things that you certainly see as a part of this strategy is that the goal is not going to be limping along to contain or limping along to simply degrade. The goal is going to be to destroy this enemy, to root them out wherever we find them, and to make sure that they realize we have a commitment to actually destroy them wherever it is that we find them. And that's the most life-saving thing that you can do on the battlefield is to have that commitment. The reality is, we're never going to make peace with a current enemy. You make peace with your former enemy, and to do that, you have to make them a former enemy.
Can you do that just by the air, though? No matter how big that bomb is, can you do it just from the air, or do you have to commit ground troops or greater ground troops? And I say this to you, sir, as an Army combat veteran who was wounded, gravely wounded in war.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about the battlefield of Afghanistan right now, which obviously we've had ground troops there for years. Right? Yeah. So that's kind of a moot point. Are we going to have ground troops there? If you're talking about other theaters of war, that's a different question. But yeah, in Afghanistan, you're going to continue to see our men on the ground there. But I think you're seeing a smart role being played here. The reality is, I know IEDs as well as anybody. They don't just come in ones and twos. They come in dozens and more than a dozen. These fighters in the area were obviously very well dug in. It's an area of largely military-age male fighters. But I think you also see a very good level of responsibility in using this device. You could have dropped more ordnance on the area if you wanted to. You could have carpet bombed the area. That would have been substantially more ordnance, but it wouldn't have been precise. It wouldn't have been a guided bomb unit like what you see being used with the Moab. And in using precision, that's a level of restraint.
This is a personal, non-political question here. You were injured. I don't know most people, in the nation know this, but you lost your legs in an IED attack 10 years ago, 2010 in Afghanistan. As you watch continued U.S. military action 7 years after that, 15 years into the conflict, just in general, what are your feelings that this is still going on in Afghanistan?
I want to see the end in sight. I care as much as anybody about my friends out there on the battlefield. I have a lot of them that are still out there, and probably the reality is I'm going to end up losing some of them before this war is over, and that's not something that I want to think about, and I don't think it's something that any American wants to think about, or any family member who has their sons and daughters over there. This isn't something that we want, but to get to that place where we're going to be able to make peace, we have to make them a former enemy, and that does require a certain level of commitment. But it's certainly not lost on me whatsoever, the cost of war. And I don't just mean that monetarily. I mean that in terms of life. I've lost 67 friends in our theaters of war. I don't just mean that in terms of limb. I recovered alongside, when I was injured in 2010, there was 50, 60 men and women a month that were waking up like me in Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I know exactly what that cost is, and I don't want to see it continue.
And we honor your commitment, sir, and certainly we respect your commitment to your friends and fellow soldiers. Congressman Brian Mast of Florida, great to have you on with us. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Always good to be with you.
Allison.
Okay, John. Donald Trump said repeatedly during the campaign that he loved WikiLeaks. Well, now his CIA director says something much different and much darker. That's next.
The books and records?
CIA Director Mike Pompeo now blasting WikiLeaks as a hostile intelligence service. Those words, of course, very different from the president's on the campaign trail.
Now, this just came out. This just came out. WikiLeaks. I love WikiLeaks.
By the way, did you see another one? Another one came in today. This WikiLeaks is like a treasure trove.
It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really
Great to have all of you. Carl, why is Mike Pompeo making a point of talking about WikiLeaks in these sort of sinister tones now?
Because it's true, and because right now we're in the midst of a huge series of investigations into the whole question of what Russia did in our election campaign to interfere with our very democratic system. And part of that story are these WikiLeaks disclosures that were aimed to destabilize us. That WikiLeaks was used, whether knowingly or unknowingly, by the Russians. You know, WikiLeaks started as a rather admirable concept of on top of which Trump is part of right now. Trump election campaign.
And we have not heard, by the way, from President Trump condemning WikiLeaks in even close to the same way or at all. You know, and David, when you hear the CIA Director Mike Pompeo, former politician Mike Pompeo, you know, condemn WikiLeaks, there's a little irony alarm that goes off, or maybe some would call it a hypocrisy alarm, because Mike Pompeo cited WikiLeaks during the campaign. President Trump said he loved WikiLeaks during the campaign.
Well, let's separate President Trump, who weaponized WikiLeaks and made it a central issue in his campaign, from Mike Pompeo, who sort of was along for the ride and maybe now a redeemed soul. One of the reasons that makes this all so urgent is there's a very important election in France coming up, which may determine whether France stays in the European Union, whether the European Union continues to exist. WikiLeaks is again acting in that election to attack the candidates of the center. It's noteworthy how pro-Russia candidates all seem to have fabulous email security, and the more Russia-skeptical candidates all seem to be so vulnerable to hacking. Those, Emmanuel Macron, who's the candidate of the center, his communications are being attacked with a view. What Russia's trying to organize is a race between the extremists of the left, the extremists of the right, both of them skeptical of democracy, both of them willing to blow up the EU, both of them friendly to Russia and hostile to the West.
Phil, how did this happen? Did WikiLeaks start as a real whistleblowing organization and then become co-opted by the Russians somehow?
I think so. I think Carl got this just right. If you look at what Mike Pompeo was saying, forget about WikiLeaks. What does an intelligence Mike Pompeo and say, regardless of what you thought as a politician, can you look at the world courage?
You know, Carl Bernstein, the other intelligence story out there today, our Pamela Brown reporting that British intelligence sources early on in the campaign passed on that they've been picking up surveillance of contacts between Trump associates and the Russians. They passed that on to the United States. You say this continues to raise questions as you see more and more facts come out, more and more of this pattern of contacts, of what the Trump administration is doing now, how they are handling this, how they are not addressing the situation, or in the words you choose to use, how they're covering it up.
There is a cover-up going on. We don't know exactly what the White House is trying to cover up about its dealings with Russia or the Trump campaign's dealings with Russia. We don't know that it's an obstruction of justice, but there certainly is an attempt by the President of the United States to obstruct and impede knowledge of what happened here. Doesn't mean he's broken the law, but why in the world would not this president say, look, the Russians interfered in our campaign. I want everybody around me who had any dealings with them to make it known. He has Pompeo. He has his intelligence community. He knows what is known by the British, by the Dutch, by these intelligence services that have picked up these intercepts of people around him speaking with Russian intelligence people. Trump knows a good deal that he's not revealing. We are going to find out an awful lot in the coming weeks and months about this cover-up. But it's really very disturbing that the President of the United States has tried to deflect and impede knowledge of what happened here in an attempt by a foreign hostile power to destabilize the United States electoral process.
I refine that a little bit. I think it's very possible that the president does not know what he's covering up. That is,
true.
He knows that there is a bad smell around Paul Manafort. He knows that Ukrainian ledger, which found millions of dollars of payments to Paul Manafort from the pro-Russian dictator of Ukraine. It's now confirmed that that is real, and we know that large sums did flow to Manafort. But exactly what the contacts were, it is very possible that other people in Trump world are terrified of what that information might possibly be, don't know exactly the magnitude of the problem. It may be terrible, it may not be so terrible, but they are trying to seal and control a story whose magnitude they themselves don't know. You've seen that before.
But Trump is the one who's trying to conceal and impede. That's what's important. The President of the United States is doing it. And not only that, the whole question now is raised about, well, what did Donald Trump say during the election, while this was going on, about his pro-Russian, pro-Putin statements and how relevant they are?
Going to possibly prove embarrassing or worse, he made that decision. But it sometimes happens, and you've seen this is very much the story of some of the Watergate events, that the people at the top are covering up a scandal whose ramifications they themselves don't fully understand.
Phil Mudd, last word.
Look, I think there's a secondary problem we need to be concerned about. President Trump is a brander. He branded a company. He's branding himself as a decision maker now, announcing, for example, how central he was in the decision to strike Syria. I fear, I have no evidence of this, I fear one of the things that might be happening with us getting sideways with Russia right now is he realizes that allying with Russia, as he said he would during the campaign, is bad branding. I'm afraid he's twisting because he's trying to cover up the campaign's relationship with Russia months ago, and that is not a good news story.
All right, guys, interesting discussion. Stay tuned for more, because you know what? There will be more. All right, she has made a big impression during President Trump's first 100 days, but you may be surprised who inspired her political run. Jamie Gangel goes one-on-one